Hey everyone, really good to see such a big group here today. Excited to get going. This webinar is a little bit different to our usual bi-weekly webinar. This one's longer. So if you haven't seen my message, this one is a 1 hour webinar or 45 minutes, let's say. Usually we try to get them done in about 20, 30 minutes. And I want to take you through a topic that is quite close to my heart, and it's about efficiency. So I really enjoy efficiency. I like to do, well, I do a lot, but I try to do it as little as possible, if you know what I mean. I try to use as little effort as possible to achieve as much as possible. And that's a very common theme that I'm having recently with safety professionals, but also people who are helping safety teams be effective. Um, and what we usually hear is that people are doing too much. So high stress levels, and in bringing a new system, let's say a new system like SoterAI, it can add m even more work to people, and that can be quite stressful to people. And in an AI world, one of the things we're hearing and what we're being told frequently is do more, do more, do more, do more quickly, right? Now, I want to take you through a strategy that I believe in. I did this myself in my career. So, for those who haven't heard my story before, I used to work in the mining industry in Australia. I was a reliability engineer, but then I was a productivity analyst as well. So, looking for how we could maximize the productivity of our mining operations. And you guys have almost certainly heard about the Pareto rule, that 20% of something makes 80% of the impact. And I want to show you today how we can use AI to actually achieve that. I did this webinar about a week ago to a group of maybe 250 safety professionals, and I found that it really resonated with people. A lot of positive feedback afterwards. So I'm going to take you through the same webinar today. So the problems that we'll be covering today, or the problem that we're trying to solve, you work for organizations that invest in safety, and they spend money on this. And yet, very often what we're seeing is that incident rates stay the same. So the question is, are these investments worthwhile? And how do we actually get the impact out of these investments? Now, as I said before, bringing in a new system can often mean more stuff. So more inspections, more training, more reports. And my theory, and I think my reality, is that more doesn't actually equal better, and less actually equals better. And imagine a world where we could actually do less admin, actually do less tasks, less work, less stress, but yet actually have a better result. And in our case, a better result means less incidents. So that's the goal of today. The framework I want to present to you is how do we cut recordable incidents by 20% while actually reducing our workload as well. And how do we use AI to do that? And the first problem that we have that you guys probably feel all the time is so much stuff, right? Let's talk about hazards. A lot of the safety teams that we talk to are tracking a lot of hazards, and a lot of the platforms that people are using also encourages tracking a lot of hazards. And not all hazards are equal, like you guys already know that, right? But tracking 50 to 200, we've seen teams that are 400, 500 hazards deep, and creating mitigation strategies for all those hazards, and treating all hazards equally as well. It's super inefficient. Again, the Pareto rule. Well, how do we find that 20% that actually matters? And you guys are all SoterAI users. You probably have started doing some of this within SoterAI, but I really want to show you in the next couple of bits, like how do we actually achieve that? The other thing that we're hearing a lot of safety professionals, loss control professionals, and insurance professionals as well saying is we spend a lot of time doing admin. Admin sucks. We all hate admin. And the less admin we can do, the better. And this is such a major use case within the Soda AI platform. Like, how do we do less admin? So I'm going to take you through that as well. So my background was as a reliability engineer. I want to talk about that for a second. So as a reliability engineer, we were really focused on making sure that our machines didn't break down unexpectedly. And to do that, we looked at a lot of data, a lot of incident data, breakdown data, captured in our maintenance management systems. And what we would do was to try to find the patterns that actually mattered. Not everything actually matters. Some incidents aren't that big and don't cause that much downtime or don't happen to systems that are that critical. Other things happen infrequently, so they could all be almost be seen as random. And then some things happen again and again and again. And I remember one project I was working on where, we were losing just 20 minutes every single time. But this thing that broke down, it was a starter motor on an excavator. This was happening like two, three times a week across multiple shifts. And when things happen over multiple shifts and they might only be 20 minutes long, they sometimes get missed, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, that quick fix, quick fix, quick fix. But if you actually drill into the data and you see how this actually adds up, you realize, okay, this is actually a really big thing that needs fixing. Um, and you guys have that with incident data. Most of you are probably using some sort of EHS system to capture this data. And then you categorize this data as well, right? And this is one of the solutions that we put in from like 10, 15, 20 years ago when we started using these systems was to categorize everything. And the reason we did that is because while reading the free text field is super, super valuable and insightful, no technology really existed to actually analyze that text. If you're trying to create like an Excel table or a pivot table or something like that, it didn't really work on free text, right? And this is why we categorized everything. If we can create a category, then maybe we can track by the categories. Um, Even when I was analyzing maintenance data from 10, 15 years ago, as an engineer who can code, I hit this problem, and I had a skill set that could potentially solve this problem, but even for me, it was difficult to solve. Um, AI has completely changed that, and one of the use cases I want to take you through in SoterAI is really showing this. It's like, how do we analyze a lot of safety data, and how do we actually analyze the free text field as well? Because a lot of insight sits there. But until the past year, we haven't really been able to analyze that data. Okay, the second thing I'll talk about after that little demo is some other capabilities as well. So we talked about the predictive analytics. I want to talk about real-time monitoring as well. So think sensors, but don't think sensors in terms of only AI sensors. It can be sensors that capture data that then AI can then analyze. So I want to talk about that. A big point I want to talk about today is also the administrative overburden, I guess, and how we can automate a lot of that. Okay, so the predictive analytics. So this is what I was talking about, all that incident data that you've captured in the past and potentially new data that's coming in from inspections, from, people reporting hazards, all that sort of stuff. Um, and Soda AI is really, really good at identifying hidden patterns. We actually have a workflow that I'm going to show you about that in a second. Um, so if I jump into SoterAI, you guys are all users of our platform, so you know what our workflow page looks like. Now, there is a workflow in there called Analyze Safety Data, um, which is in the safety section. Um, sorry, too many workflows. Yeah, I forget what it's called. Anyway, we'll just jump straight into it because I've got an example. And when I jump into it, we'll figure out what it was called. Okay, analyze incidents trends is what the workflow is called. And I've got an example here for you to show. So we've got this fictional example that I want to show you, but it's sort of modeled on what a real data set might look like. And the reason I'm not doing this live, as you guys are users, you know that sometimes the more complex workflows can take minutes and sometimes tens, doesn't even 30 minutes sometimes to run some workflows. And I thought that would be a pretty poor webinar. So I just did the analysis in advance. And the incident data. So what I've done is I've put in incident data from one of our from an example that we have, fast food restaurant injury data. And this incident data is actually 82,000 different incident records. Yeah, as I said, if you try to imagine how to analyze that, super difficult, right? So what I've done is I've uploaded the data and I've said, tell me my top risks and missing controls. It's done the analysis. So when I did this, it took about, I think it took close to 30 minutes because it's a lot of data. But this is all you really need to do to understand what is that 20% that you guys should focus on. And that means there's 80% of stuff that you guys shouldn't focus on or you shouldn't make a priority. And that really feeds into the doing less sort of methodology that I'm talking about. So what you'll get after running that on your incident data, which you can export out of your safety system in CSV, you can upload it here into our platform, and then you can get the analysis. So a couple of graphs, fine. Um, I think this is quite interesting data. So top risks by mechanism of incident. So you got your sharp edges, your burns, your hot oils, your stuff like that, right? You can even break it down by the locations within the fast food restaurant, which is interesting because if you want to now identify the equipment or the work processes that you want to really focus on, location is quite useful. And this is actually, this partly analyzes the data from the raw text as well. So it's not like categorization, but it can actually go a bit deeper. It can really go into the potential. If you ask the right question, you can even go into the actual equipment or the actual way that people use that equipment that ultimately led to these incidents happening. Um, Here we have the equipment involved, so super interesting. Fryers is a huge problem in this example that I'm showing. And then here's your top overall risks. So you got your cuts, you got your burns, you got your whatevers, right? I'm gonna show you something in about 20 minutes later, 20 minutes later, that will actually take this to the next level. But for now, we're just looking where the risk is actually lying. And this is really interesting. Why do these incidents actually happen? We have missing controls. So the reason why people keep getting cut, you guys are safety professionals, you understand the hierarchy of controls. We know that, just relying on people's behavior or even PPE isn't always the best answer. If we can, we want to go up the hierarchy of controls. So the likely missing like or inadequate controls we can see here. Same with the burns, same with the slips and trips. And then we start going down the level of priorities. And then it even can build you a bit of an action plan as well. Now, hopefully you guys are working with the AI and not just taking the answers out of AI. But if you're working with the AI, what should I do about this particular piece of equipment? Maybe you want to bring in some extra documentation. Maybe you want to take photos of this piece of equipment. But what you've started to do here is you've started to identify that 20% that you should worry about and don't worry about the other 80%. Okay, remembering that we are going to take this to the next level in about 15 minutes time, but we know where to look, and I think that's cool. Okay, the second thing that you guys should be thinking about, you already use SoterAI, so that's great. But how do you get more live data into the system and into the work that you do? So if you understand that, guarding potentially is an issue, and people, let's say the guarding keeps going missing, or people take it off, or it becomes inadequate, or something like that. You know, you can do monitoring of this. Now, in the maintenance world, what we used to do condition monitoring. So we used to measure things for vibration. We used to measure things for increased heat, or we would even use like heat guns and stuff like thermal imagery and stuff like that, right? We would do inspections for cracks, like small cracks that would then potentially become big cracks and all that sort of stuff. This is called condition monitoring. This is actually why you guys do inspections. You're not looking to stop an incident. You're looking for the hazards that if you remove those hazards, you will stop an incident. And the quicker you can spot a hazard and the quicker you can rectify a hazard, the less chance you have an incident actually happening. So inspections is one reason to do condition monitoring. One thing to be aware of, though, is the more inspections you do on the more stuff that you have, the more diluted you make everything. Now, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't do inspections on stuff that aren't causing incidents, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be focusing on hazards that you know might exist, or maybe the inspections are the reasons that these hazards aren't appearing and becoming incidents. But on account of you as well, and you guys can figure this out yourself, but on account of you, um, maybe you don't need to be inspecting everything or on a certain frequency or that frequently, right? Maybe you should be focusing more on the things that we know cause the incidents more and less on the stuff that doesn't seem to be causing a problem and not treating everything equally. Again, less might be more. Now, you guys are all, professionals, experts, qualifications, and a lot of experience. So I'm not saying, like what doing these inspections don't have value. But am asking you to go away and have a think of like, are we putting our effort, which is a finite resource, into the right areas? And if not, then how do we make this change? CCTV, I want to talk about that for a second, because that's also a sensor type. Actually, before I do that, other sensors that I think are super interesting are guarding sensors. So machines can actually tell if the guarding has been removed. Some machines don't operate if the guarding is removed. There are sensors on elevated work platforms that are quite interesting, or that you can add to elevated work platforms that are quite interesting. So, sensors could be really interesting to understand. Do hazards exist? Can we stop those hazards? Can we rectify those hazards? And then to CCTV. I'm a little bit disappointed in CCTV currently. I think it'll get better, and I think SoterAI might do something in the future that might make it better as well. But my disappointment comes from the noise that I seem to see that CCTV is generating. Now, measuring, certain PPE things or certain forklift things or stuff like that, measuring that these hazards or incidents or minor incidents or near misses, let's call them, exist and are happening, sometimes adds a lot of value. So again, if it's adding a lot of value, fantastic and it's awesome. But I see also sometimes that it's just adding to the noise. It's adding to your problem of like there's so much stuff going on and now I have more stuff. So I would sort of advise people or yeah, I don't know what the right word is, but have a think about, are we using if we're using CCTV AI, or if we're thinking of it, are we using it to solve a real problem? Or do we not know that maybe that a real problem exists and then that's a fantastic use of it? And then how do we prevent it from adding to the noise? Because we don't always need to know that more hazards exist, especially if we're not going to act on them, or if we're just going to push into a supervisor to act on them, which I've seen, I reckon, 3 times now in the last couple of months, where that has actually started to lead to a breakdown of trust and culture and communication between supervisors and workers, like the people that are actually doing the work, that you guys need to be motivated, that you guys need to be thinking about their safety as well, and telling them off all the time for the same hazard or the same, exclusion area that apparently they're not supposed to go to, but yet the whole work site is designed in a way that it makes more sense to go through that area. You know, these are the things you should be thinking about. So if you're using it in a way to actually fix the problem, fantastic. If we're just pushing it down into discipline, not sure, right? But this is again for you guys to think about. I'm just a big fan of sensors in general, and thinking that and remembering that inspections themselves are a sensor. Your eyes looking and doing an inspection is effectively a sensor. Machine guarding, EWP are really cool sensors. So there's a lot of cool sensors out there as well. And then plugging a lot of these can be AI solutions or plugged into AI solutions. Okay. And hopefully you guys are living in this world at the moment. A huge value proposition of Soda AI is administrative automation. Now, I've heard people say, automating the safety role, can be dangerous. What about our experience? How do you measure it's correct or not? Hopefully, you guys are working with AI and not just relying on the automation itself. But I myself am a massive automation person. A lot of what I do through the workday, I'm one of our biggest Soda AI users ourselves, like of our own platform. I think I'm in the top 5, which is pretty cool. I'm using it for all the things that I need to do to run my business, Sota. So I have made my own custom workflows for product releases, for marketing materials. I've created this entire presentation in SoterAI as well. But I review everything, right? I work with the AI. So this presentation, while it was made using AI, I worked with the AI to create it. This is why it's not AI slop. I know what's coming up. I've crafted the message. I know exactly what I'm talking about. It just made it a lot quicker for me to create this presentation. And on top of that, the result of this presentation, like what I'm actually presenting, is a lot better than if I had manually created it myself. And you guys have your own examples of this, and hopefully more and more. And on the right-hand side, what we've got is a bit of a graph, or a graph of the top use cases within SoterAI. Um, so pilot procedure documentation. If you guys are getting value out of this, I'm super grateful and happy. And I think half my mission is complete because I've talked to customers, worked with customers, watched customers try to do policy reviews, documentation reviews, writing JSAs or JHAs or whatever you guys might call them. And I think doing that job without the assistance of AI must be soul destroying. So if you guys are getting value out of that, I'm super happy. Writing documentations, reviewing documentation, great. I have examples where, one of the automotive customers we work with, we're spending one whole month. The anecdote is they were spending a whole month with multiple people reviewing all their policies yearly. And now they've got that down to a number of days. And I'm not sure it takes the whole team anymore. So that's great. Inspections as well. So the hazard ID inspection is one of the, well, I've got that as actually a separate category, is a really, really strong use case. But doing inspections themselves, so audits or, I know our loss control people in insurance do a lot of audits on site. That counts as an inspection. So they're able to upload a lot of their voice notes as they do the inspection, photos, videos, and then what the AI and giving as they're collecting data, they're also advising the AI like what they would like to do with this data. And then when that audit or that site visit is done, they then ask the AI to write the final report. And if they're giving like good notes and the photos are good and all that sort of stuff, what they get is a really, really top quality report at the end of the day. So that's also a really good use case. I would really stress and ask people to try do your root cause analysis through SoterAI as well. Gather all your information up front. So gather the incident in information, do your interviews, capture all that information as well. But then uploading all that and then working with AI to do the root cause analysis is, in my opinion, quite mind-blowing. And I come from a background where I did a lot of root cause analyses in my previous roles. On top of that, we also do our root cause analysis in SOTA now when we have some tech issue or something like that. We do that also through SoterAI. I think it's completely mind-blowing. Um, and quite motivating to do as well, because it can be sort of a long process to do a root cause analysis or a detailed investigation. It can take weeks to go through and, to get feedback and back and forwards and then to get to the final result. We now internally do a root cause analysis in about 45 minutes with the whole team. And I think it's way better than if it took weeks and weeks to do. So I'm a big fan of the root cause analysis. We have a real example, though, of people that have reduced their admin burden. This case study from George Weston Foods is on our website. And what it is, this case study is they are launching or commissioning, I guess is the right word, a new facility. So they have a new factory. There's a lot of new machinery, a lot of automation actually in this new facility. And there was 420 or even more pieces of plant and equipment that the team had to do risk assessments on. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I was told I had to do 420 risk assessments. Even with AI, it's very daunting. Without it, I would be doing the biggest and most pointless tick and flick exercise of my life. And you guys might be better than me, and congratulations if you are. But I think it's really, really difficult to do something at that scale to a high quality. So what would happen before Soda AI is that it would get done, but would it add any value, right? Now, what they did is they actually created how they created these risk assessments is they uploaded a lot of information up front. So the equipment documentation, the standards that applied, this is down in Australia, so a lot of ISO standards, but then also Australian standards. They uploaded a lot of their historical documentation as well for machines that might have been similar or are similar. They took photos, they took videos, and then all this got processed into the actual risk assessment. And that pre-processing, I guess, of information to create the initial version to review of that risk assessment went very well for them. And then all they would need to do is sit down with the team and then go through like a final review. So like hours and days and weeks and I reckon months worth of saved time went into this project and created a much better series of risk assessments than if they had done it manually. So again, I hear a lot of people saying, should you automate health and safety? What about the experience? What is it correct? How do we measure is it correct? I have a few answers for this. My first answer is does AI do a better job and how can you measure it? Well, I think the first thing is I would like to know how to measure a person doing the same job. And if anyone can give me that answer of like how to measure how good a person is at doing a risk assessment or a policy review, then I would use that same test to measure how well the AI does. Um, but okay, like that test probably doesn't exist, and I don't really need to prove the AI that way because you guys are the solution. You guys work with the AI. You have the experience, you have the education. This is why the safety professional exists, and this is why it'll continue to exist in the future. All we're doing is we're making your expertise, applying your expertise and the work that you do a lot more efficient. So working with AI is the solution. I strongly believe that. Okay, I said I was going to take safety analysis to the next level. Um, I'm well connected on LinkedIn, with a lot of safety professionals, including experts in safety, or experts, let's call them, the influencers, right? And I don't know about you guys, but I see some of these theories and philosophies that people have around all these different frameworks that have existed and continue to exist. And now people are trying to build new philosophies around AI. And I call them the yappers. Um, to me, honestly, like most of it is a whole lot of blah blah. A framework for this, a philosophy for that. Like, man, who cares? I have a really simple belief when it comes to safety, that all it is the battle between hazards and controls. If you have adequate controls that properly control the hazards or remove the hazards ideally, but control the hazards, then we're going to have less incidents. Ultimately, we're going for no incidents at all. The controls can't be too overbearing. As much as, safety comes first, you don't want to shut down the productivity of your organization as well. So they have to be well thought out controls. And if the hazards start winning, then the incidents start happening as well. And then we're probably not going home so happily, right? So all it is this battle of hazards and controls. Now, to do hazard and control analysis against each other is a very difficult thing to do. Controls live in a whole bunch of, well, they live in documentation, but even the documentation themselves doesn't reflect what's actually happening out in the field. So a whole lot of analysis needs to be done to see, are our controls actually matching our hazards? I call this hazard control mapping. So what we did before is we analyzed our incident data to look for hazards, and then we said what controls are actually, like, do we think are missing so that these incidents keep happening, right? All right, but let's now analyze the control side of things as well. So, existing documentation. Your controls probably, and not always do, but probably should exist, should be in your documentation, whether that's your procedure, policies, training materials, they probably should be documented somewhere. If they're not documented anywhere, they could still exist, but I kind of think it's kind of unlikely. But on the counter to that, if they exist in the documentation, it definitely doesn't mean that they exist in the field. Writing a document hasn't solved anything. Applying that documentation sometimes has solved some things, but just because they're written in a document doesn't mean anything. But I think it's a really good place to start at least. So your documentation represents what controls should exist, at least your expected state. Um, then you can also, so that I'm going to show you in a second how to do that analysis in SoterAI. Hopefully you guys have done a bit of that already. But then on top of that, the verification of controls part can happen as well. So, for example, if we see that controls should exist, and yet these incidents keep happening, does that control exist? Is it effective? Is it actually implemented? Is it actually happening? What is really going on, right? So it'll tell you where to look. And that goes back to that 20% of things that actually matter. If the incidents aren't happening and you've got good control documentation in place, like probably you have no problem, right? If the incidents are happening, let's drill into what is actually happening and why, what we actually need to fix. And this is finding the gaps. So are the controls documented? If they are documented, do we believe those controls are effective? And if we believe they should be effective, let's verify that they're actually happening in the field. And one of those things will have been going wrong 100% if you've got the incidents. So either no one's thought of that they should exist, or they're not effective, or they're not being implemented properly. And if that's all you did as a safety professional, I reckon you'd have a massive impact in your organization. And then if you can build a system that does that for your teams, even better, right? If you can if you can put your team's focus on implementing a control or maybe, making like improving the training or helping them put in the right controls as well, then you can really extend your reach and your influence as a safety professional. So what would I rather you guys do? I'd rather you finding the gaps than reviewing a policy for, is it compliant with the latest OSHA regulations? Like we have an AI workflow for that. Use the AI workflow. It's probably going to get the right answer, 99%, right? Put your effort and focus into this work. Okay, so what we actually have within Soda AI is very powerful, and not everyone knows about it or has used it or knows how to use it, and it's called risk intelligence. So if I jump back into the Soda AI platform, um, you guys know about workflows, great. You guys might be starting to use our record management system, which by the way is a way better. I'm going to show you that at the end, maybe if I have time, but some really cool stuff there. You guys have probably started to use data sources, and this helps the AI understand things about your organization. So, firstly, you've got your external data that people use to put in like standards. So, some ISO standard or some industry standard that you guys need to constantly refer to, you should put that into the external data section. And then when you're doing some AI task and you want it to like it probably will find the standard itself, but if you want to refer to a particular standard, you just say, refer to this standard in the data sources, and then it will pull the information from there automatically for you. Internal data is reserved for your actual operational data. And what does that mean? So firstly, your incident and your hazard data, you should upload that regularly into SoterAI, into this internal data sources. And when you upload it, um, unfortunately, I've got a bit of an old version here. Um, if I upload it again, no. Okay. When you upload something, let's say you upload a CSV with your incidents from the last 2 years, let's say. When you upload that, you'll have a little button here that says process for risk intelligence. And you can click that little arrow button and it will process the data for risk intelligence, which I'll show you in a second. The other documentation that you should be uploading um, is your control documentation. So your policies, your procedures, your training materials, and all that sort of stuff. Your SOPs, all that should be uploaded. And again, you'll have a little button here that you can click, and it will process that information for risk intelligence. This information has been processed, so we see that it's enabled, and it's been ticked. So the tick button here, risk intelligence, has been successfully updated for this file. So what happens when you click that button? Um, the data gets actually organized in a way within risk intelligence that does something really special. So first, it creates a whole bunch of records, individual records. So each incident is an individual record. So if I jump here, this is an incident that happened 12th of the 12th, 2015. And this is the incident that happened, right? So that's pretty easy to comprehend. It just creates a whole bunch of incidents within risk intelligence. Same with hazards, a whole bunch of hazards within risk intelligence. Controls is super interesting. What it does is it pulls out individual controls from your documentation. So if a control is referred to in one of your documents, it is pulled out as an individual control. So it's actually turning something very complex and, a lot of detail, like a policy document or a safety program document, right? Which talks about a whole bunch of stuff, and it turns it into a whole bunch of little stuff. And then what does it do with those records? It actually creates our risk intelligence, which is a whole bunch of risk scenarios. So it groups your incident, your hazard, and your control documentation together under a certain risk scenario. So if we look at our first risk scenario here, the AI does this automatically. It created risk of musculoskeletal injuries, I should say. It links all the related incidents to that, the hazards, and then the controls that I talked to within the documentation. So, for example, ergonomic risk monitoring for new hires. Somewhere in the documentation, it talks about the training, the back manual handling training, right? So it can pull all that together and create this risk scenario. It looks a bit like if I get out of that, it looks a bit like what do you call this? I forget what this is called, but you guys have seen this sort of scenario document. I just can't think of what the actual name is. Um, so a register, risk register. So here, also what it does is it gives it a score. So based on, likelihood and consequence again, but it gives you a score. So you can now look at these scores and you can say where the problem is and where your controls are failing. So if I went into this one and I went into the controls that I documented for the risk of unsecured objects, and this is my second highest risk within my business, I'm not happy with what I read here. There is something off around our documented controls for this particular problem. So, as a safety professional whose goal is to reduce incidents by, let's say, 20%, but whatever your goal is, I'm going to focus on this, for example. I'm going to figure out, should I have better controls documented? How do I implement them in the field? How do I verify they are implemented correctly in the field and providing the reduction in risk that I'm looking for from those hazards? You can even talk in the AI here, so you could actually ask the questions directly in the AI. So if I said based on incidents for this risk scenario, what missing controls am I seeing? I'm not a biggest fan of working in here. I like more to work within the general chat. So I would start a new chat and then I would talk about this incident. Um, but it's pretty much the same thing. And what it's doing now, it's comparing my incidents that have actually happened to my missing controls. The only issue with what I'm showing you is it's a demo version, so it's not like a real world use case with real control documentation with real incidents. When you guys do this yourselves, you will get way better, analyses and like this will be such a richer experience for you guys. If you want to see how risk intelligence works, it's in the help center, so help.soto.com. And we've got a whole risk intelligence section there that'll guide you through like how to actually set this up and then use it. You guys know sometimes the amount of detail that it goes into, so I'm not going to wait for that. I'm just going to continue with the workflow, the presentation, but you guys, you know what our system looks like, so you know that it works. Okay. What I would do as a safety professional, over a 12-month period. You guys are already users of SoterAI, so that's great. I would upload my documentation and my historical data, and I would find that 20%. I would then identify which hazards I want to focus on first. I would call this a bit of a pilot internally, maybe, or maybe not. Up to you guys how you actually manage it. But I would just focus on the biggest ones first, and then I would just implement controls one by one. And I would make sure those controls are effective, efficient, implemented. I would verify them. I would use Hazard ID to verify them at times. And then I would see that risk scenario drop down the list over time as I upload my new safety incident data if I'm not capturing that in SoterAI itself. And then I would go to the next one. And I wouldn't focus on the stuff that is the noise. You know, if people if some system or some people are telling me that this particular hazard is, really scary and really dangerous, maybe it is because incidents happening in the past is definitely not meaning what's going to happen in the future. So, like, we should focus on that. But I would really try to reduce the noise by this approach and just really focus on what matters. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about quickly, is what's happening in SoterAI, and how I would position the ROI in your business. A lot of safety professionals I talk to, who I work with, um, struggle to communicate value to the overall business. And if they do, they talk about incident reduction. And that is ultimately what we're trying to do. But it is the biggest, hardest, most difficult thing to prove, even almost even looking backwards, but definitely projecting forwards. Like, how do I know that a particular system or a particular project or something is going to reduce incidents and injuries? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be focused on that and you shouldn't be doing that and you shouldn't be pitching that. But I want to show you another way as well to basically get budget for your organizations and to make yourselves look like business people. I don't know what the right way to say that is. Like you talk dollars, talk real dollars, right? So what's happening in Soda AI today is in April, we had over 28,000 different workflows completed. This is not started, this is completed within Soda AI last month. The average time saved, we have some sort of metric internally that we try to estimate how much time each workflow is saving the person that finishes the workflow. And the average time per workflow, we calculated at 44 minutes per workflow, leading to over almost 21,000 hours saved, right? 21,000 hours is the equivalent of 10 full-time safety people being purely effective, um, just delivering, results non-stop, so 24 hours a day for the entire month. If you try to estimate the value of someone working to that level, or 10 people working to that level, and if you use the OSHA sort of recommendation of $3 to $4 return on investment for every dollar spent, that's $3 to $4.5 million of value created within a single month within SoterAI. Um, Now, if you try to do your own analysis of that, your number is going to be way smaller, but this is a different way to calculate the ROI of what happens within SoterAI. And this is how I would pitch it to my teams. Now, I created this for a whole bunch of people, in that work on that webinar that I did, a couple of weeks ago, who aren't using SoterAI, but you guys are using SoterAI. So my advice to you is like if you want to be like seen as a senior leadership sort of business person who talks numbers, right? Real numbers that I can prove today, I would be talking about Soda AI and my AI usage in general around the time that I save as a safety professional and then the time that I save across my team of safety professionals and then the time that I save across everyone doing safety in Soda AI if we have more and more people using it in different use cases. And this is how I would pitch the value that I bring as a safety professional who is AI powered, who is leveraging AI to be basically a superhero. And the funny thing about this is I believe at the same time as pitching this, you can actually be doing less, which I think is super cool. Like, who doesn't want more for less? So I believe not only does your life become easier, and you get home happier and all that sort of stuff, the results get better because the work, like how could not mapping hazards to controls actually provide value? If that doesn't provide value, I don't believe in safety. It clearly will result in value. And on top of that, you're creating real value in terms of like how much value and time and stuff is created for the business that we can actually quantify properly for the first time. So this is what I would be doing as a safety professional. Okay, the last little bit that I wanted to show you. Not everyone has used this in our platform. What about me? Who is me? The frontline worker. So what we actually released is records within SoterAI. You guys probably, a lot of you will be using existing safety platforms, and that's great. And you're probably going to be quite difficult to pull those safety platforms out and replace it with SoterAI, but you will eventually, I'm pretty confident. But, maybe you can start with just inspections. You guys know how the inspection works. Maybe you want to create an inspection, and do that particular inspection in SoterAI. What I am going to show you is incident recording, which I mean is kind of the most boring, but it's also the quickest one to do. And one thing that we're doing in Soda, amongst all the things that we're doing in Soda, is we want to kill the form. So forms were created right back to the start of what I talked about here. Were created in a way to create categories. And again, we created categories so that we could properly analyze the data. So a lot of the forms that you're making your people fill out is a whole bunch of drop-down lists, right? And they sit there. Hopefully, they're not doing this on paper. They're using some sort of text solution, right? But they're clicking on this field and they're selecting this and they're typing on this and they're trying to do it on a tablet typing and it just sucks. And in sucking, it also results in a pretty poor result for you guys in that not really good information is captured as well. So I want to show you an alternative approach to this. You can do this on the web version on a mobile on a cell phone already today. In June, maybe early July, we will have our native app as well. So if you're not ready for this today, just imagine in July you've got a native app, and you're creating an incident or you're doing an inspection. So it's a really nice UI. It's going to be a super simple UI for people. And then what people can do is they can just talk to Soda AI, or they can just take a photo of what they're inspecting or what they're trying to do. And they don't have to go through this form. The form still exists because we have to capture data somehow, but you don't have to fill out the form. John injured his knee because he was walking past, our drill presses, and we see, that the floor is actually rising in some of those areas. So he actually tripped over one of these risen areas, and fell over and slightly twisted his knee. But he said he didn't need to go to hospital, and he went straight back to work actually. So we're just reporting this as a near miss. But it was yeah, just near the drill presses, and I think this is happening more frequently, but I'm not really sure, right? Yeah. It's quite slow on today's voice. All right, let me just try that again. We'll just upload that. I think it's because I'm presenting to you guys on the webinar at the same time, so it's using a different microphone. If you haven't used our voice transcription already, do. It is probably the best, unless you use Whisper, which is a specialized app, but it is basically the best voice transcription like going around at the moment. So we have people doing this even in very loud, noisy environments, and it works perfectly. I think the only time it doesn't work is if I'm presenting a webinar. So anyway, but what you see, it took the information that I said, not very clean as well. I just blah blahed. And it started filling out the fields for me. So it created my description. It put in the name because, okay, I'll put in a proper name next time. The knee, the immediate action because I didn't really mention immediate action, and I identified a root cause, um, which will come in like when you save that record and you go into that record straight away, you can see the root cause, right? Like you've probably got nothing to do with John. It's a near miss and done, right? You just go to the root cause. Like, hey, is this happening frequently? Like, let's fix that root cause so this incident mechanism never happens again. The second thing that I think is pretty cool, but is a much better experience in the app version, um, is that the AI talks back to the person as well. So this is what's missing. So I could now talk, I could take a photo. And if I took a photo of this, it would analyze that photo as well. That would be super interesting. But this is a quick example of like how we're killing the form. And I want to kill the form. Like if that's one of the things we do at SoterAI, and in 5, 10 years' time that no one's filling out these manual forms anymore, I'll mark our time at SoterAI and working with you guys as a big success. Imagine doing this for inspections now. You're doing an equipment inspection. Our insurance loss control professionals are creating quite complex audits that they need to do when they go to their client site. And then all they do is they live here and they take photo, they take video, they say voice notes. And then everything gets uploaded into a complex inspection, or if they're actually creating a report, which is a different workflow, it's creating the report for them. No more filling out the form. It's going to die, and I'm going to kill it, basically. Okay, so that actually brings me almost to the end of this presentation. Yeah, you understand the key takeaways. You guys are already users of SoterAI, so hopefully some of this has been super useful for you. And I can look at some questions if you guys want to write some questions now. But yeah, like if you need more help, reach out to myself or reach out to Jess, who you've probably worked with. We're here for you. We're here to help you. We want to see you get the most out of the platform. We want to see you doing more with less effort. Okay, so that's the presentation done. If I find the question section, or if you want to drop it in the notes as well, if that's possible. Okay, my first question, unfortunately, Brian, I don't fully understand. How do we find our organization? Um, Not sure, unfortunately, what you mean by that question. Brian, sorry, not Brian. If anyone wants to add another question into the Q&A. Okay, Veronica. Just for clarification, for inspections, all it takes is videos, pictures, and upload. You can do it that way. Like basically you can upload any information you want. So if you want to drop a voice note, if you want to type, if you want to take a picture or upload a picture, if you want to upload a video, take a video directly in the conversation. Yes, you can do that. You should do that. The more inputs that you give, the better the inspection will be. And it'll guide you as well on what's missing. So it'll automatically fill out the forms for you, but then say, I don't have this information, I'm missing that. So it's just like any other conversation or interaction with Soda AI. It's kind of that chat conversation, right? Back and forwards. It never finishes. So if you want to do more, you just keep adding more and more stuff. Brian, clarifying the question on the AI Soda page in the top left-hand corner, how do you find your organization? Most people only have their organization to look at. I have multiple organizations. Um, but if you go to the very top and you've got your workspaces, and then the very first link that you have on the very top is your organization, you can click on that. And then if you have multiple organizations, you can see multiple, but most people don't. Veronica, Brian, if you need more help as well, just reach out to myself or Jess. Like we'll follow that one up if you need it. Veronica, if after records are created, is it stored on the SOTA platform? Yes, it is. It's stored within data sources. Um, oh, sorry, within the records management module. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the different record types, and then if you click on one of those, you will see all the records that have been created for that record type. So if you start capturing your incidents, you'll have a whole list of all your incidents there. Same with inspections. Cindy, I'm new to using Soda. This has been very helpful. Do you have a tutorial that is even more basic? Yes. If you go to the Help Center, Cindy, and there is an onboarding section within SoterAI, within the Help Center, and it really goes through the very first steps for you. Um, and then they get more advanced, the tutorials. So there's a whole bunch of tutorials that we've recorded that you can watch through. Um, I've just shared one of them today, actually, the risk intelligence one to one of our customers. Like super detailed, like detailed but not complex. So I believe that's what you're looking for. Help.soda.com, or click one of the links within the platform to get to the help center. I will also be sharing this, obviously, to all the attendees of the webinar. If you haven't unsubscribed from our list, some people unsubscribe and then they're unsubscribed from everything, but you can also find it on YouTube as well, the webinar. So if you jump on our YouTube page, you can see the webinar probably later today or early tomorrow. Okay, I'll give 30 seconds maybe to if someone else wants to ask another question. We're basically at the end of the time anyway. So I'll do one last question if anyone does it within the next 15. Okay, I will say that's it. Closing it off. So again, if you need help, reach out to myself or Jess. If you want me, I haven't really offered this before to anyone, but if you work with a lot of safety professionals in your organization and you want me to come in and talk about hazard control mapping, and do a presentation similar to this, I probably would be pretty open to it. So if you want that, just let me know. And I hope this has been useful, and I hope to see you in 2 weeks' time with myself or one of my colleagues. So thank you.